eventually that runs into its limits. So we've run trade deficits so significantly for so long that we've really kind of deindustrialized ourselves. We have trouble making a lot of our own things. We're much slower at infrastructure than we used to be. We have rising populism, especially if you don't live on the coast and you don't work in intellectual property or finance. If you're more, the people that have been harmed by this arrangement, there's just more populism. So that basically the United States is starting to face some of the consequences of having the system.
Lyn delves into the intricate web of currency competition, emphasizing the dominance of the US dollar, which accounts for a staggering 90% of global transactions and serves as the linchpin connecting various fiat currencies worldwide. As we unravel the complexities of this system, Lyn highlights the advantages the US enjoys, such as the ability to run deficits without triggering currency crises. However, she also points out the inherent challenges, noting that the demand for the dollar strengthens the currency, impacting trade competitiveness and contributing to a structural trade deficit. Lyn's analysis underscores the dichotomy within the US economy, where those involved in the financial system or high-margin industries benefit, while manufacturers and industries face hurdles in a deindustrialized environment. The consequences of this system, including slowed infrastructure development and rising populism, are becoming increasingly evident. Let's dive into the rest of the clip to hear her full thesis.
So in a world where we go back to the prior problem of gold is no longer settling quickly now, in a world where it's the world needs telecommunication speed settlement, but gold itself is not providing that, you then need an abstraction layer over it, some sort of ledger that different countries are using in order to settle with each other. And just like any kind of money is like a market good, it has to compete with other monies in the region. When we have 160 different countries in the world, well, more than that, but 160 different currencies in the world among nearly 200 countries, those currencies are competing with each other, and you basically recreate barter, right? So if there's all these different currencies, then every country has to kind of manage, okay, which currencies do I want or not want? What do I do with the currencies I get from selling my goods and services to them? And so because of liquidity and network effects and scalability, it tends to concentrate in a handful of bigger ones. And so it used to be the British pound. They had the strongest network effect around the world. They could kind of serve as the world ledger in many aspects. And after World War II, that shifted over to the United States. And so the United States is, the dollar is 90%. It's involved in 90% of global FX conversions. Something like 60% of international transactions. I forget all the numbers, but it's a dominant force across the board because it's kind of the glue that connects all these other fiat currencies together. And that gives the United States significant, kind of advantages in the sense that they can sanction countries and cut them off from that network. They have extra monetary premium on their currency. So multiple people around the world want to hold dollars for lack of a better other money to hold in many cases. And so that kind of extends the runway of the U.S. to be able to run deficits without triggering currency crises. It doesn't give you unlimited amounts, but it extends the amount that you have. But the downside of that is that if there's so much extra demand for your currency worldwide, it boosts the strength of your currency compared to the trade balance. It basically makes Americans' import strength stronger, but it makes our export competitiveness weaker. And so basically, that's how we supply the world with dollars, is through a structural trade deficit. And so there's a cost to maintain that system. And so in many ways, that dollar system has really benefited Washington, New York. If you're involved in running the money system, if you're involved in high margin intellectual property, healthcare, tech, that kind of stuff, you're fine. But if you're involved in trying to make things in the United States, for example, this system has generally been harmful for you. There's like an artificial extra monetary premium on the dollar, which just makes it much harder to operate, with global competitors, let alone developing countries, but even other developed countries. That's why Germany and Japan, for so many decades, were able to kind of take market share from the United States, and eventually it became China and others taking market share. But eventually that runs into its limits. So we've run trade deficits so significantly for so long that we've really kind of deindustrialized ourselves. We have trouble making a lot of our own things. We're much slower at infrastructure than we used to be. We have rising populism, especially if you don't live on the coast and you don't work in intellectual property or finance. If you're more, the people that have been harmed by this arrangement, there's just more populism. So that basically the United States is starting to face some of the consequences of having the system.
In this next clip, Lyn Alden unfolds a nuanced perspective on the future of the world's reserve currency, backed by compelling data. Currently, the US dollar holds a dominant position, comprising 90% of global transactions and maintaining a significant role in international trade. Lyn provides historical context, citing the gradual shift away from a singular reserve currency, emphasizing that the transition isn't a binary outcome. She points out that the US, once holding over 40% of global GDP and the majority of gold during the Bretton Woods era, has seen a redistribution of economic power globally. As Lyn navigates through the intricacies, she forecasts a multipolar future, suggesting a more diverse currency landscape. The global financial crisis acted as a catalyst, and recent geopolitical events, like Russia's actions in Ukraine, have accelerated the move towards a decentralized world.
So I don't think it's a Boolean outcome. Even when the UK went through their, process, Bretton Woods was the big time where there was a changeover, but it really wasn't until the 1950s Suez crisis that they, kind of fully were realized as having lost their reserve currency status. It comes in parts. Going forward, there's really no currency block that has the capability to be the sole world's currency. Most people think, because of the past two currencies, we assume that the next one is another fiat currency, that some country will just continue to run this ledger. But I would argue that this has been an anomaly that is specifically tied to our current state of technology, which is basically when you don't have a way to do fast settlements, when you have, fast transaction speeds, but not fast settlement speeds. And so you're reliant on somebody's centralized ledger to kind of glue things together. And that's really only been Britain and the United States. Going forward, I don't think there's really no country that has that capability. So when during the Bretton Woods system and during the early parts of this current fiat currency system, the United States had over 40% of global GDP. And they had most of the gold. They were running trade surpluses. They were basically a hyperpower. And so they had the capability to be that ledger. We've diminished ourselves over time as the rest of the world has rebuilt after that era. We're now a smaller part of global GDP, and we're running structural trade deficits. We have a much smaller share of the gold. Things have just kind of distributed more. But there's no other currency block that has 40% of global GDP. Like Europe doesn't have it, China doesn't have it. Both of those regions have more aging demographics than the United States does. Neither of those have the geographical strength of the United States. And so there's really no currency block that can just be the whole world's primary currency anymore. So I think what we're entering is a multipolar world. I think this largely began during the global financial crisis. Since then, there's been relatively little treasury accumulation among the foreign sector. There's been more gold accumulation among the foreign sector. And then with recent events, now we see China buying more of their energy in their own currency, for example. And so I think we're setting up to see just a more diverse currency situation in the world and more reliant on neutral assets, with the current one being gold as the primary one that they go to. And that so it's not something that say, okay, 2 years from now we're going to say, okay, now the world reserve currency's changed. No, it's a gradual shift towards that kind of more decentralized world that is, punctuated by moments. Like, for example, the Russian invasion of Ukraine and the subsequent freezing of their reserves, and then them pivoting towards, quickly towards more non-dollar deals with entities like China. Those are stepwise changes that happen. But even then, there's multiple of those types of steps within a longer process of just kind of things balancing themselves out in a more kind of sustainable way.
In today's insightful discussion, we've explored the intricate dynamics of the global reserve currency system with Lyn Alden. From the historical dominance of the US dollar to the potential shifts in a multipolar world, we've covered it all. If you found this analysis valuable, don't forget to hit the subscribe button, give us a thumbs up, and share your thoughts in the comments below.